You had mentioned in your speech that Richard Nixon was instrumental in promoting civil rights. Could you briefly tell me about his effects on the movement?
Yeah, I don't think you would say that he was one of the prominent movers of civil rights in the country, but I think you would say he was pretty prominent as a Republican. And the amazing thing about Nixon is that he got 30% of the black vote. And no Republican candidate has come even close to that since. There were some people advising Eisenhower not to take him as a running mate because they worried that his popularity in the black community might hurt his support in the white community. So this is a very little known fact about Richard Nixon. It needs to be better known.
I wanted to ask you mainly about the issue of torture. I saw that you were on Anderson Cooper
Yes,
this past
yes.
week.
I'm a regular contributor to CNN, so I'm on 2-3 times a week.
You said that the Obama administration's new position was tantamount to bloodlust. What do you believe prompted this change in policy, especially since Director of National Intelligence Dennis Blair said that, quote, "I do not fault those who made the decisions at the time"?
Well, the word in Washington, I can't tell you whether it's true or not, is that he was very heavily pressured from left-wing groups like MoveOn.org and others. The degree of hatred toward George Bush on the part of these folks is incalculable. And they want to see these guys brought before, the American people and hung, Dick Cheney or George Bush or the lawyers and so on. Otherwise, I don't understand why he would do it. It was a real about-face. It was a real 180. It's a very bad thing for a president to do unless he has very good reason. And then they tried to make it seem as if this was always the same story, and it wasn't the same story, obviously. You had him saying, let's move forward, let's not look back. You had Rahm Emanuel as chief of staff saying the same thing, and then he was asked specifically, Rahm Emanuel, about people who had given the advice and the okay, and he said, no, all of them, everybody, it's all in the past, let's move forward. So it was an embarrassing turn for him, I think.
Can you take weight from the likes of former FBI Director Robert Mueller and the argument that these techniques don't necessarily avert attacks?
Don't necessarily what?
That these techniques don't help to avert attacks on U.S. soil.
Well, I suppose one can say that, but it seems to me the evidence here is pretty clear that in the interrogations of Zubaydah and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, that this information did aid. It aided in some 6,000 inquiries that were then made on the basis of it. And people can say, well, if you didn't do that, you might have gotten it anyway. Maybe, who knows? But information was gleaned from this that was valuable. Again, you don't have to believe me. Believe the Director of National Intelligence, Dennis Blair, whom you mentioned earlier, and all the CIA directors from Tenet forward were opposed to Obama doing what he did, and all said that this gave valuable information. Now, we'll see. I mean, it looks like all these documents are going to be revealed, so we'll all soon know the answer. I think he may come to regret this.
Putting this in a bit of historical context, is this issue of rigorous interrogation, is it out of character for the United States throughout its history? I mean, we see instances where in World War II, Ted Kennedy and others brought up the fact that we prosecuted the Japanese for using techniques similar to water torture.
In addition to lots of other things. The Japanese were prosecuted. But, it is not torture. At least there is a lot of legal opinion to the effect that it is not torture. Now, people will argue that. But if you look at these memos, you will see that they are talking about structuring it in such a way that there isn't a permanent harm. You have medical personnel handy. You're limited in how long you can do this. There are all sorts of things that if you were just torturing somebody, you wouldn't have. Is it unusual? Absolutely, it's unusual. But so were the circumstances of 9/11. We're only talking about a very small number of cases where this waterboarding took place. So yes, it's unusual, and I don't think people relish doing it, but it has proved to be an effective way of getting information. Remember, too, an awful lot of our servicemen go through this very same thing, and a number of journalists have gone through it.
There's an argument about whether the use of these techniques is mutually exclusive to the sanctity of our democracy. Some people don't even care if it works. Shepard Smith just this past week said ostensibly that I don't care if it works. America doesn't torture. Is this type of thing a blight on us at all?
No, I don't think so. Well, first of all, note what's being said there begs the question, as we say in philosophy. Once you start to call it torture, we made an assumption in the argument, which a lot of people would question. I don't think it is torture. I think it's an extreme and enhanced interrogation technique. I don't think it's torture. I don't think we would torture hundreds or thousands of our men who go through this procedure in the military, special ops guys and all sorts of people. Is it a blight? No, it's not something to be done lightly. It's not something to be done usually. Something in extreme circumstances. But put this question squarely to the American people. If this technique, which does no permanent physical harm but scares the heck out of somebody, is used to get information which prevented a California version of 9/11, was it worth it? And I will tell you, you're going to get 80% of the American people saying yes.
So would you also say that we're also risking something sacred by prosecuting CIA, Justice Department officials, and former Bush
that we're doing what? We're doing what?
By prosecuting former Bush administration officials, former CIA officials, retroactively. It wasn't illegal at the time.
Yeah, it's crazy to even think about prosecuting lawyers. These guys are asked for their legal opinions. You can't prosecute a lawyer for giving an honest legal opinion. You can't prosecute the vice president or the president or the director of CIA for advocating this when they are told we've had the worst attack in American history. Make sure it doesn't happen again. Supposing someone had proposed waterboarding on these guys and they had a meeting and they decided against it. And then the Library Tower in LA was taken down by an attack. And somebody steps up today and says, I think if we'd waterboarded these guys, we might have gotten that information. You know what would have happened? They would have blamed Bush for that. They would have just been all over Bush for doing that. So there's no winning here for him in the eyes of people.